Shalom to everybody. Good morning from Israel. Today we're going to continue our classes on the subject of prayer for Noahides. So everybody's welcome to pose their questions here in the chat on the right side of the Facebook live class. And I just used the chance to say that yesterday it was not possible for me to give a class for different reasons, and today the class is a little bit also later than usual, but we are here and we're going to start today with the subject of prayer, which we are going to try to look into, give some insights and to understand further what it accomplishes during the next few days. So for the basis of our study, we are going to use the Noahide prayer booklet that some of you have already, and you can also read about it and acquire it if you wish to do so on the Noahide Academy website. So this very practical Siddur, which was written by Rabbi Moshe Weiner and Rabbi Emmanuel Shochat, and edited and published by Ask Noach International with Rabbi Schulman, is on prayers, blessings, principles of faith, and divine service for Noahides. So we're going to go through the different parts and how you can try to bring it into a practical activity in your daily life. So I'll go through the introduction of the prayer booklet, and then we'll explain and give some insights further on the theme of prayer. So the obligation to pray is to ask for physical needs, but the true main purpose is to connect with the Creator. A constant connection with God is also an essential human need, that God should be with a person in all his ways, and all of his ways should be fitting for this connection. The prayer itself is a connection, made through conversation, requests, and praises to God, who hears the prayer of all and also provides the spiritual need. A main part of prayer is one's concentration on the greatness of God and the truth of his existence, to set these ideas in one's heart in all areas of his life. So let's try to look into this subject of prayer and this great human expression of attachment, of relationship with God. So in Hebrew, the word for prayer is tefillah. Tefillah comes from the root of tofel klei cherez, meaning to glue different parts together. If someone, for example, had a jar that broke up, he would glue the pieces back together in order to bring it back to its previous state of a unified state. So tefillah comes from the word tofel, to glue different pieces together. So a person who is praying to God is basically gluing himself back to God. In the beginning there was one piece, God and the human soul. The soul is one with God. And then when the soul comes down into the world, it becomes somehow separated from him. And through prayer, he can glue back to its source. Further on, prayer also allows a gluing of the different parts within the human soul. As we learned for the last week or a little bit more, the last 8 classes, we went through the 7 commandments and through the 7 aspects of the human soul, or the different traits of character, from loving kindness until humility. But how do all those different expressions of the human personality come into balance? So that's through prayer. Prayer allows to establish a balance between the different 7 expressions of one's personality, or the 7 powers of the soul. In which way? In the way that prayer connects the totality of the human soul back to its source. And therefore, if it operates a certain nullification within the 7 different traits of character within a soul, and then different things can coexist in one single human being. The 7 powers of the soul can coexist in a unique human being. For example, there are people that are more loving kindness, that are more loving and generous to others. There are people that are more disciplined and organized. There are people that are more compassionate about others. There are people that are more entrepreneurial, they can make projects. There are people that are more humble, etc. So how does a person can really fulfill the predominant aspect of his personality if he comes down all the other aspects of his personality? Because they also exist, and in every single human being there are those 7 aspects of one's personality that everyone looks into, make a balance, into adjust the proper dose of energy that one focus in the different activities or the different expressions of his personality. So prayer accomplishes that. Prayer allows a person to balance the different energy or vitality that comes from the higher worlds and invest itself in every one of the 7 different aspects of the human personality. Further on, let's ask the question. And the question is asked by the student of the great Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the one that revealed Chassidut, the inner dimensions of Torah, as we have it today, and allow us to live in the presence of the divine, conscious of the divine providence, of the creation ex nihilo every single moment, as we talked in the former classes. His student, the Maggid of Mezerich, he has a beautiful insight onto prayer that I would like to share with you, and that's about the proper approach to prayer. As we mentioned before, one starts praying to request something from God. We're the receivers and God is the giver. So we're about to request something to the giver because we're lacking something. We lack something, material, spiritually, health, a house, food, whatever the need might be. So we generally focus on prayer from a lower perspective. I just use the chance to say welcome Maya and Leo. Al, welcome. I hope the class yesterday was good. Glad to see you. Kirchner is around. Avram, shalom aleichem. Ken, I did that. Okay. Christina, Eliana, as I mentioned before, thank you for joining the class. As I mentioned before, you can post your questions during the class so I can address them. You're invited to do so. So, shalom, Maya. So, the Maggid of Mezerich asks the following question. When a person starts praying to God, why does he really ask something that he's lacking here in this physical world? Is this the best approach that one should have in prayer and when addressing oneself to God? To mention what we're lacking here in the physical world, in our physical daily life? So as we saw before, that's only the start, the starting point, the motivating factor that brings us to open a discussion with the giver of all, with the giver of life, with the eternal sustainer of every single detail of creation, including ourselves, including our needs, including every breath that we take. So it's a logic that one should address oneself to God. Nevertheless, before we address the question of the Maggid of Mezerich, I mention here that the obligation of a Noahide to pray is a little bit different than the obligation of a Jew to pray. A Jew has an obligation to pray 3 times a day on a general basis, and further on, in different occasions, he has to pray a little bit more, another extra prayer on the Sabbath or in Yom Kippur, and another 2 extra prayers. But a Noahide has an obligation to pray on a minimum basis once, let's say, at least once in a lifetime, and if possible, a little bit more, once a year, and even better, once a month, and even much better, once a week. And it's really advisable, and I personally advise everyone to try, if possible, to pray once a day at least. You're going to see in the prayer booklet that it's possible to pray twice a day, or even more. If you're a more spiritually sensitive person, you can pray more. Now, one has to pay attention. A Noahide has to pay attention to one detail: not to take upon himself the vow of praying. He can say, and he should say, that he takes upon himself the vow of praying at least once a month, at least. And at that time, he has to set things aside to pray to God at least once a month. And this is an obligation, to set up a time and to actually pray to God, to express his thanks to God. But further on, a Chasidu Mot HaOlam, one that goes beyond the letter of the law, should realize how important and how this is really an expression of the relationship with God. And there are many people trying different methodologies in order to get more spiritual, more sensitive to the messages enclosed within reality. And people that are trying to do meditation or different ways in order to connect to what's beyond our sensorial reality, and prayer is definitely the ultimate expression of it. So if one really learns how to pray and do it in the best way, one can really achieve what the relationship of a human being and God can be all about. Okay, so this said, we're going to go back to the question of the Maggid of Mezerich, the student of the Baal Shem Tov, and the proper approach to prayer. So we ask the question: is it the best way to approach prayer or God in mentioning what we're lacking on our physical needs? So we ought to reflect a little bit before we pray, and the concept of meditation comes from the Torah. We are required, if possible, for a Jew, it's an obligation from the Shulchan Aruch, to meditate in the greatness of God before one prays. It is a siman, it's a melacha, it's a law. For a Noahide, it's not an obligation, but it's definitely something that one should consider. If one can set time in the morning before he goes to his work, after he takes breakfast, he's ready, he's dressed, he has taken his shower, and before he goes to his job, he can take 10 minutes, 15 minutes to make 3 minutes of clearing up of his mind, of his agenda, and to focus on the provider of all good, a provider of God, and saying in a sincere heart, saying, God, you give me all, I will also give you all. All of my life is you, and that I should express. That's the overall kavanah, intention that one should have. And of course, there's many details that come into it afterwards that Bezat Hashem will look into it the next classes. After those 2 minutes of meditation, one can then try to approach prayer, as we're going to see as well in the next classes, with the blessings of the morning and the different parts of prayer, of accepting the kingship of heaven upon oneself, and saying and expressing one's specific needs. But let's back to the answer. So the appropriate approach for prayer, says the Maggid of Mezerich, is to consider that the greatness of God. And automatically one will come to the realization that maybe the what we had in mind 2 minutes ago about that we're missing something, maybe it's not so accurate. Maybe we have it all. Maybe we have what we really need. Maybe everything is complete. We are breathing, we are standing, we are talking to God, we have our eyes see, our mouth speaks, our ears hear, and it seems that everything is here. So the Maggid of Mezrich says, how can it be that something would be lacking here in the physical world if it's not lacking in the spiritual world? One knows that every detail of the physical world is only the parallel, is the mirror of the spiritual world. It's a sequence of concretization of the spiritual light that becomes the material details. Therefore, if something would be missing here in the physical world, it's necessarily because it's missing on the spiritual world. Like a person look at the mirror. If he's looking at the mirror without a hat, in the mirror, the hat will not be reflected. So if the person focus on the mirror, on the image of the mirror, and says, I want a hat, I want a hat, I want a hat, the mirror is not gonna solve anything. He has to take and put a hat on his head, and so the hat will also appear in the mirror. That's a metaphor for what happens in the physical world. If one wants something to be in the physical world, one should focus on its source. So that's what the Maggid of Mezrich is saying, that one should really focus when one is approaching prayer. Should focus on the deficiency on the thing that is lacking above. That's the source of what's lacking down below. So that's the first aspect that we should consider, to realize that if someone, chas v'shalom, God forbid, is lacking health, or is lacking a livelihood, or other things that he needs, one should consider that something is lacking above. And one should request from God that he make him clear what is lacking above, the lack of understanding of what God expects from that person, and like that to resolve what is lacking down here. That's the first aspect of the answer of the Maggid of Mezrich. The second aspect of the answer of the Maggid of Mezrich is the following. And he asks the question, now that we understood that something is only lacking below if it's lacking above, one should ask himself that question. How can it be that something is lacking above? Isn't it the spiritual world complete? Isn't it only godliness? Isn't it only completeness, and only down here humans who perturbate or cause some filters and prevent the divine influence to come down from the higher worlds to the lower worlds? Isn't that the case? So how can be something lacking above? So the Maggid of Mezrich explains in the following way. There is a process through which the divine influence, the divine light, comes from the higher worlds, the highest, the Or Ein Sof, the light with no limitations, from which everything comes into being, goes through a number of stages in order to become enclosed within the physical world and to become a material aspect of our life, like health, or like livelihood, or like children, or like a house, etc. So one should understand that that process from the infinite light of God, which everything is complete, where there's an abundance of everything and everything is there. So nothing is really lacking. And what happens in our world when someone is lacking, chas v'sholem, health, or children, or a house, etc., in fact, there is something in the middle, something in the way that is preventing that life to be clothed within our physical world. And here's a secret that Noahides should appreciate. And in a very deep level, this is one of the special connections between Noahides and the Jewish people. That process, the major limiting factor, or the level which allows the full expression of the divine light in the world, is what is called in the inner dimensions of Torah. There are many levels of angels, but there is a level which is called the level of the 70 ministers, that are just, in fact, different channels through which the divine light comes through the world and invests itself in the world. And it's alluding to the source of the 70 nations, to the Noahides. Therefore, the prayer of a Noahide is very much appreciated, because it's an intrinsic part of the fulfillment of the divine plan for the world, for humanity. It's very important. When a Noahide prays to God and understands the ideas that we just discussed, he's allowed to become a window of the divine light into the world at such a level that in the inner dimensions is also explained that when a Noahide gives a blessing or says a blessing to a Jew, and Jew says Amen, it really unifies two of the highest levels of God's name, which is the name Adnut, which is for Malchus, which is for kingship, revealed in the blessing of the Noahide, and the name Havaya, which is revealed within the Jews, which is the name that allows revelation of divinity within the world. And the Noahide will reveal the kingship of God within the world. So through prayer, a Noahide can really accomplish his role in the fulfillment of the divine intent for creation. I hope this was clear. I know there are many insights that are probably new for most of you. It's not on one foot. This is the first class on the subject of prayer. Again, as I mentioned before at the beginning of the class, you can find the prayer text in the Siddur, in the order of praying to God, in the prayer booklet of prayers, blessings, and principles of faith and divine service for Noahides on the Noahide Academy website. I will be posting a link to the prayer booklet if you wish to acquire it. There is also a course which deals with this subject of prayer. It's the course on prayer and service of God, which is there on the homepage of the website, that you can study further on with Rabbi Weiner, the halachic basis for Noahides to pray, and further on what prayer is all about, and other subjects that we are going to see together, also mentioning the blessings on food that the Noahide is required, not obligated, but definitely advised and should really try to do them. So I'm going to try to address here one question of Leo. So Leo asks, does the Noahide require to perform morning rituals such as Moideyani, Netilat, Yasher Yatzar, etc.? So the answer is, there are a number of rituals that a Noahide is required to perform every morning, and it's written on the Siddur, like the prayer from Modeani. It is required for a Noahide to recognize in the presence of who he is from the moment he wakes up, in the presence of Melech Malchi Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in front of the King of Kings, God Almighty, and he will say the prayer on Modeani, in English, it's on page 12 of the prayer booklet. I will read it with you. After preparing oneself for praying, recite, I offer thanks to you, living and eternal King, for you have mercifully restored my soul within me. Your faithfulness is great. And then we'll go on and say, Adon Olam, Lord of the universe, and further on the blessings of the morning that we're going to explore during the next few days, Bezat Hashem. So for the question of Modiani, it's answered. For Netilat Yadayim, no, you're not required to do Netilat Yadayim, meaning pouring a buck of water once in one hand in alternative way, 3 times in each hand. You are not required to do that, that is a Jewish ritual, but you are definitely required to wash yourself before prayer, definitely, and washing your hands. It's definitely important. The hands are the part of the body one of the parts of the body that becomes more dirty, because it's the more exterior part of a person. It's constantly interfacing with the elements of the world. So definitely one should, if possible, definitely wash the hands before prayer, but not in a ritual way as the Jews do. If a Noahide wants to use a bucket and do like the Jews do 3 times an alternative way without a blessing on the hands, it's not forbidden to them to do so, but one should not be specifically makpid, try to observe things that are not that are Jewish, just specific Jewish rituals, and focus on what a Noahide needs to do. And that's one should ensure that he's already doing the best he can, all that he needs to do, instead of worrying with things that are just extras and are not required for a Noahide. Okay, so the third question regarding the prayer of Asher Yatzar, again, a Noahide is not required to say the blessing of Asher Yatzar when one goes out from the toilet, but it's permitted for a Noahide to say it in English, the prayer of Asher Yatzar. But you will see that in the prayer booklet is not referred to, because it's not required for a Noahide to do so. But it is permitted for him to do so if he desires to do it in English. He should not say it in Hebrew unless he fully understands the meaning of every single word. So if one wants to say it in English, it is permitted to do so, but one should not look particularly into be makpid, into be specifically attentive in doing this, but in doing what really needs to be done in the Siddur, the blessings of the morning, as we're going to see it during the next classes on page 13, and as well as the Psalms of every single day. And what is very important is to do the blessings on food. And on that, a Noahide should be makpid, should be specifically cautious to do the blessings on food and on drink. And if one considers in doing other things, like Leo asked about pouring water in the hands, or saying Asher Yatzar, the one who created us, one should definitely be sure that he's not fooling himself. And the games of the Yetzer Hara are often dangerous. We have a saying in the evening prayer, says that we ask God to push away the evil inclination from before us and from behind us. From before us, we can understand easily, because the evil inclination does not allow us to progress in the service of God and the fulfilling of our purpose. But from behind, what does it matter if the evil inclination is behind us? Why should one ask from God to remove the evil inclination also from behind him? So the answer is that sometimes the evil inclination tries to push us too fast. And in pushing it too fast, is another technique in order to fool us. You say, push us too fast, do this and do that and do that and do this and do that and that, and the person will eventually fall because he cannot take too many decisions at the same time. And if a person takes upon himself things that are not required from him, obligatory from him, at some point it will not resonate within his soul. So he will, what the result sometimes is that the person just leaves everything and just goes back to the starting point, to zero. Because a person wants to do a lot, and it's just the evil inclination pushing us too fast. And one should not go too fast. One should go at a stabilized cruise speed, meaning that one should do what is required to do and not try to do so much more, but try to do more on what he's allowed to do. To say Psalms, you can say Psalms for 1 hour a day, for 6 hour days, for all day long, for that matter, if you have the time, if you wish, and you have that sensitivity. But to add things that are not required, one should refrain from that, because it's another technique of the Yetzer Hara. Okay? I hope that answers the question. There's another question from Renato. Shalom Rav, aqui do Brasil. Shalom Renato, como é que você está? Você pode me enviar uma mensagem em privado? Se você desejar uma classe em português, a gente pode dar uma classe em português. I was just mentioning to Renato that a class in Portuguese may be organized if you wishes to do so. Al is asking the question, can I pray or recite the daily prayer for livelihood in the Noahide prayer booklet? The answer is yes. You can recite the prayer for livelihood on a daily basis. Definitely yes. The prayer is found on page 41 of the prayer booklet. The prayer for livelihood is to be found there, and you can definitely say it once a day. If your wife is standing by you when you're saying it, she should answer Amen once you're concluding the prayer. Okay, another question from Alana from Australia. How can I get the prayer book? Is it on the website? So the answer is yes. The booklet is on the website, the Noahide Academy website shop. Here I cannot share the screen. Only on Skype we can share the screen, but it's easy to find it. I'm going to post a link under the video so you can have direct access to the booklet, and it's very practical, because it's compact, and you can put it in your pocket and have it with you on your pocket during all day long. It's the best thing. Every time you're going to eat something, okay, you just open it up and you can say the appropriate blessing on the food that you're about to eat. And it's really practical to have it on your pocket. One should be careful when he's entering into a restroom, into a bathroom, not to leave the book outside. Okay, but on page 33, you have the blessings. Okay, and that for the 6 types of foods, you have a specific blessing. We're going to go through it in the next few classes, Bezat Hashem. Okay, so we're going to go through the different laws and the different blessings. But it's definitely a great thing to have this prayer booklet in your pocket. It's compact, it's not very thick, so it's easy to use. And the important thing is not the thickness of a book, is what it contains. Never judge a book by its cover, but what the usefulness, how many times do you open it during the day? That's the important thing. A religious person, a spiritual sensitive person, is a person with profundity, with inner feeling, not a superficial person. Okay, one has to be very clear on this, that religiosity or spirituality, it's not to be superficial. It's not, don't judge a book by its cover. It's to be profound, to have inner insight, to be focused in the real thing, and not to be distracted by external conditions. Okay, so, all right, so I see that, okay, there's no other questions, so I leave you here today. We are going to continue Bezat Hashem, if God allows us, tomorrow with the second class on prayer for Noahides. The class will be Bezat Hashem updated also on the events on the Noahide Academy website on broadcasts. Okay, so this new series will be there together with all the other broadcasts, so you can check it out if you missed one or you don't find it on Facebook. With pleasure, Bob. Thank you for being here, even if it's late there in the United States, or early in the morning. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning or so, more or less. So with pleasure, nice seeing you all, and we'll be looking forward for more questions tomorrow during the class. Bezat Hashem. You should all have a great day, or a good, nice evening, or a good night. And Bezat Hashem, we should all add in acts of goodness and kindness to in haste in the coming of Mashiach. We should see him speedily in our days.